You look at the human body. The body, you've got cells, organs, systems of interaction with each other, and then you've got organisms, people who are interacting with ourselves and the outside world. So that the irreducible complexity here is, what can you get rid of? For DNA, you need a water supply. For DNA, you need an oxygen supply. You can't just say, oh, we had one and then we evolved the next few things. No, it won't work. We can't even get out of bed in the morning unless we have a reason for doing that. Humans have purpose. I became an evolutionist, a bit of an angry evolutionist. These PhD scientists were showing that the age of the Earth was short. I was gobsmacked. I literally thought, why wasn't I told?
You've probably been taught that your body has slowly evolved through millions of mutations over millions of years to the amazing person that you are now. But what would you think if someone said that there is a lot of evidence that what you've been taught isn't true? I'm here today with Dr. Dianne Grocott, who has 40 years of experience in medicine and psychiatry. Dianne, as a medical doctor, when did you start questioning evolution?
I didn't until I was 30. I had a church upbringing, so we were taught that Adam and Eve were myths for primitive people, and God had set the world going and sort of wandered off and left things. I thought he was a pretty nasty sort of a person sitting up there in the sky with a big stick, and so you didn't want to be close to God. Then I went to a church school and we sang hymns to the Creator in assembly, and that was wonderful, knowing that we were created. But we then put him back in his box and he didn't arrive again for the rest of the day, and we learnt about evolution and we learnt giraffes. You know, they evolved long necks because the food was up high. And nobody asked any questions. Nobody said, well, what did the little ones eat until they got up high? And why didn't zebras grow long necks? None of that. I just believed it all. But I didn't like the idea of God. I thought he was a bit of a dismissive, absent parent. So I became an evolutionist at about 15. A bit of an angry evolutionist, wasn't interested in the church, thought there was a lot of hypocrisy there, so I went off doing my own thing. Then I went to university, and it was so nice to be able to learn and know things, because I really love knowledge. And we learnt all about human evolution, you know, the Australopithecines, and we were examined on those.
Yep.
And I learnt about the family tree and how everything evolved from other things. And that was pretty good. It felt okay. And there were some amazing things about the human body. Everything's so complex. And when we were learning about the kidney, it was almost mind-boggling. It was like, how did that happen? And I thought, wow, isn't evolution amazing? And I just took it all in. And then became a doctor. I really enjoyed that, did psychiatry, and I really liked people and their minds. And I learned all of Freud's theories and all the other different theories. And I thought, I'm going to find the answer. It's going to all come together and it all makes sense. And it sort of didn't. And then at about 30, I think the biological alarm bells were going, and I'm starting to think, what's the point of this? You know, why? I can see where I could go in my career and in life, and then it all ends. And there was a sort of a looking for something, because there must be something more than the natural. So I went looking for spiritual, anywhere except Christianity, because I'd given that a miss. I remember doing a meditation course, and each week we'd meditate on a different type of religion, and they had a Christian one, and we had to meditate on the name of Jesus, and something stirred. And I was quite uncomfortable because I didn't expect that. Anyway, I totally ignored it, of course. And then later on I actually was looking, and you know, it is, if you seek, you'll find. And I met God, and I was most surprised. And so I thought, I'm going back to the church. And I thought at that stage, well, it's like an insurance policy, so it just means you go to heaven when you die. And I was still not answering any questions, or not even asking any questions. Right. My husband accidentally became a Christian. He was not looking. He thought I'd lost the plot when I was looking. Diane's looking for another ism again. You know, she's looking for the meaning of life, you know. Anyway, God smacked him over the head, and he's going, oh, my goodness. Well, he's a scientist, so he thought, well, my mates will think, well, basically my employer and my colleagues will think I've thrown my brains out. So he started to find out all this evidence for creation and the scientific evidence there, and took me along to a Creation Ministries conference, and I was gobsmacked. These PhD scientists were showing that the age of the earth was short. There's so much evidence for that. There's so much evidence for all the different things that I thought I didn't even know there were questions for. For example, the giraffe. All right, so you want to make a giraffe have a long neck? Great idea. Okay, so you'd think you just have to add genes for long neck. But what you do is you actually have to pump the blood up higher, so you need higher pressure. So you need a bigger heart. Okay, and the other problem is when it leans down for a drink, it's going to blow its little brains out and all the blood's going to fall back there. So you've got to have special veins with special valves to stop all the blood going back. And then you've got all this high pressure. Well, we've got to have a thicker skin, otherwise it's going to bleed to death outside of its skin. And then the other thing is, and I only learned this recently, if you've got a longer air tube, you know what? You've got to push a lot more carbon dioxide out before you can get another breath of fresh air. So if you've got lungs that can push up that high, and then you elongate the neck, you're going to die, you're going to suffocate. So you've got to actually have the lungs to be bigger. So you can't just go, let's have a longer neck. Everything all works together. And I literally thought, why wasn't I told? When I was 15, when I was looking and I was wanting to be something more than just a mote in the universe that nobody cares about, who has to look after themselves. And it's pretty scary being 15 when you think you're going to have to take charge of your life and that there's nobody really there, and God sort of wandered off. And so I started to go, this is amazing. Why hasn't everybody heard? And I thought people would be so excited. And we had a friend who came to the Creation Ministries conference, and I'm just going, isn't this amazing? I thought he'd go, I want to become a Christian now. And he goes, oh, well, I can't refute anything I've heard here, but no, not interested. He just wasn't.
Even though he was recognising that there was evidence here, and he's saying he can't refute it.
He can't refute it. But he just said he wasn't looking. And if people aren't looking, fine. You don't want to beat them over the head with the Bible. That's really, really important. But if people are looking, I think they deserve answers.
And you were looking.
I was looking.
And you were looking for answers, and you were starting to ask the right questions.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Dianne, let's have a look at DNA. You've been talking about the giraffe and all these things that were needed for this long neck to actually function properly and for the giraffe not to die.
Yep.
Why don't we talk about DNA? So when you started asking these questions, what did you learn about DNA?
Okay. Mostly from Creation Ministries. Rob Carter is a geneticist who's taught the most amazing things. And look, we all know about DNA. It's the double ladder, the spiral helix. It's got all these little letters which are coded, and there's so much amazing stuff about DNA. I have brought you a mnemonic. Yes, DESIGN. Okay, D stands for dependent. So the DNA actually is dependent on the cell, but the cell can't be there without the DNA. Okay, that couldn't have evolved step by step by step. DNA is really fragile. It's about 2 meters long in all of your cells.
Yep.
You've got a little bit, very tiny, but it's about 2 meters long. It's all coiled up. If it was the length or the width of a hair, it would be like 50 kilometres wrapped up in the size of a golf ball. It's amazing. And then you've got all these little letters, and they are A, C, G and T. You probably remember that from school.
Yep.
And what I learnt at school was the little RNA, the thing unzips and the RNA reads it, and then you get an impression, and then 3 of those little letters, they're called a codon. Each 3 is turned in eventually to one amino acid. Amino acids are like pearls on a necklace. So if you get all the different amino acids together, here's your protein, and then the protein can wrap up, and then it does whatever it does. It might be a cell wall, or it might be a postie in the cell, or it might be an enzyme which makes things, and does a whole lot of different things. But basically, you've got these 3 letters, and you would think the reading would just go, if we had, say, A, C, G, A, T, you'd think that the letters you just read the first 3, then you get an amino acid, then you read the next 3 and you get another amino acid. Well, you know what? You can start at the second point and you can read those 3 letters and you get a different amino acid. Or you can start at the third point and read those 3 letters and you get a different amino acid. So you can have 3 lots of, if you like, sentences from those letters, whether you start at the first, the second or third one. And so there's amazing complexity. And where did I go next? D, E. E is, I went straight into that, the enormous complexity. So you've got your letters, which is your string, that's the first dimension. Then you've got the second dimension, which is the way things are connected, because DNA, right. Well, only about 2% of our DNA actually codes for protein. The rest of it, they used to think was called junk DNA. That actually is almost like a supercomputer. It's the operating system that tells everything else what to do and when. And then when you look at the whole operating system, everything connects with each other and those things are turned on and off all the time.
Yep.
So that's the second dimension. The third dimension is the fact that it's actually, they wrap up together. You know, our pictures of DNA is usually at making a new cell. They all spread out and they're all sort of on the Petri dish with their little their chromosomes.
Yes.
But the way they work, they are actually, it's like a dance. They're choreographed and all the chromosomes, they all fit amongst each other. Mm-hmm. And if you want to read off, say, a particular protein, it might be a section from that chromosome here, a section from that chromosome and another section from that chromosome.
Okay.
That's the third dimension is, 3D. 4D, of course, is time. This changes. So you might actually be reading, the RNA might be reading the instructions for this particular protein from those three things, and then they flip, and then you can read another thing for another protein, which is how we've got 20 to 30,000 genes can create 100 to 300,000 proteins. There's an enormous complexity in that whole thing, and it isn't just lines, it's amazing. It's actually the biggest supercomputer we have with a better operating system than anything that's been developed for space exploration to this point. So what was that? That was DE. E was extraordinary complexity. S stands for software. The point about any language is there's a difference between the actual biological way that you can convey the language and what you're actually conveying. So you can evolve a whole lot of letters. You can even evolve how to read them, but you've got to know how they're matching the thing that they're going to become. So perhaps an easier example is letters on a page. If on your computer you've typed GIFT, and I speak English, I think you're talking about a present. If I speak German, the word is poison that means poison in German.
Right.
So the letters are letters. They don't mean anything until somebody reads them and somebody interprets them.
Yep.
They can't just evolve. You've got to have a reason. Design is all about a plan premeditated for a purpose. You can have the stuff, but if you haven't got the purpose, it's not design. And if it's designed and there's a purpose that was premeditated, there must have been a designer.
And Dianne, if someone says that the world, everything, our bodies has evolved, how does that mean there isn't any purpose?
Funny, because you've got to do some mental gymnastics. We just happen to evolve out of nothing in a sort of a linear fashion with no purpose. But on the other hand, we just look at the world around us. We look at humans. We can't even think. We can't even get out of bed in the morning unless we have a reason for doing that. That somehow there's some... We just know in ourselves that if we move, something will happen. Now, we have to learn that and things can go wrong, but actually humans have purpose.
We are up to, so we're spelling design, DES. We're up to I.
I love that one. Irreducible complexity.
Oh, that's a big word.
Oh, it is a big word, okay. But you've heard of a mousetrap, haven't you?
Yes.
And if you think of a mousetrap, okay, you can have fancy ones, big or small, but for a mousetrap to actually do its job, you've got to have a certain number of parts. There's actually 5 parts to a mousetrap, and if you take any one of those 5 parts away, you've got 4 parts and the thing doesn't work.
Right.
All right, so that's the concept, which you look at the human body, actually even humans in our environment and in the world. But let's just go back to the DNA. So basically, in order to have DNA functioning, you've got to have a cell to look after it, but you've also got to have a whole lot of machinery to keep it clean and stop all the little errors that happen all the time, like a million a day. And you thought that DNA was just sit. No, it doesn't just sit there. It's really fragile, really complex. And then in order for your cell to actually work, let's just say you just want to repair a little piece of your DNA. Well, where are you going to get your stuff from? Oh, okay, you've got to have a gut which actually gets the stuff and digests it and sends it off through the bloodstream to your cell. And you've got to get it through the cell wall, and not to mention the fact that the organism might have had to have gone to find the food. Okay, so just to repair and maintain, you've got to have this outside source. On the other hand, you've got the cell, which is so complex. As complex as like New York City. And you have to have everything that you have in the cells, including an energy supply, a waste disposal function. You've got to have building and repair materials. You've even got to have a postal service. You know, the
postal
cell.
Service.
These amazing little proteins, and they walk them along these little microtubules inside the cell.
They walk.
Yeah, they walk. Yeah, there's a video. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah, you should, kinesin they're called. Just Google them. So the cell is amazing. Yeah. The DNA keeps the cell going. The cell keeps the DNA going. But what keeps the cell going? After that, you've got the rest of the body. You've got cells, organs, systems of interaction with each other, and then you've got organisms, people who are interacting with ourselves and the outside world. So that the irreducible complexity here is, what can you get rid of? Okay, for DNA you need a water supply. For DNA you need an oxygen supply. You can't get rid of it. You can't just say, oh, we had one and then we evolved the next few things. It just didn't happen. It was just designed from outside, and it's amazing.
So that process where evolution says that we slowly evolved into the bodies that we have today, the people that we are today, with irreducible complexity, it doesn't seem possible.
Right. Next one was G, which is getting new DNA. Charles Darwin just didn't know that you couldn't just pop in a new piece of DNA. Let's just say you've got a single cell, and that would have DNA for the things that it does in a single cell. Okay. And where's it going to get enough DNA to do a new thing? DNA is like a blueprint for a machine. So if you've got a car, you've got the blueprint for the car, however many pages that would be. Well, you would imagine that the blueprint for a space station would be somewhat different. But you can't just copy and copy and copy the car and think you're going to get a space station. You've got to get new information. And the biology itself doesn't provide information. Where did you get your information from? Outside of the system.
That's so important to just hear. The biology itself doesn't supply the information.
No, absolutely. But the other thing we're taught is that things change by mutation, okay?
Yes,
now, natural selection, right. Natural selection is like dog breeding. You know, you want a dog which has this colour or this sort of a nose or whatever. And what you do is you take the ones you like and you kill off the ones you don't like. Well, you don't breed them, you hope. And then eventually over a number of generations you get the new thing. And then you say, wow, I've created a new dog. Well, you haven't. You've still got a dog. It's still a variety of dog. You haven't created anything that flies, because all it had was the original dog genes, and you've shuffled them around a bit and you've got rid of some of them. Okay, so if you happen to be a Pekingese, you're not going to turn into a wolf. But if you're a wolf, you can probably turn into, well, Pekingese if you want to. But let's look at humans and natural selection. Natural selection always takes away information. So you've actually got to start with a deck of cards, and then you can shuffle them and you might get all the aces for your hand, but you can't add new things. Okay? Now, we get taught thalassemia, for example, a beneficial mutation. Well, thalassemia basically is a mutation. It's where the red blood cell is quite fragile, and it doesn't last as long, and you're more likely to be anemic because it's not going to be able to carry the oxygen as much as you like. It is helpful if everybody in your town has been infected with the malaria parasite, because that gets into the blood cells, and then the fragile blood cells break and the malaria parasite can't be supported there. So people with thalassemia are more likely to survive an attack by malaria, whereas other people might die out. And then what happens is there'll be a higher proportion of the people in that area who have thalassemia. But it didn't add any information.
Beneficial, but didn't add
information. And the other one we've got to talk about are the superbacteria. And I must confess, I have sat in lectures, and I've even as a doctor sat in the hospital where someone was talking about all the biological changes and the evolution of the new bacteria, and I knew that was rubbish. Absolutely. But I wasn't going to stand up and, risk my career by saying that's rubbish because, again, an idea is contained with a lot of ideas. And if you just get one idea, the whole thing isn't going to change. If I'd said to the person, even if they'd said to me, well, what do you mean it's rubbish? I'd say, well, those bacteria, they're actually damaged, they're mutated. Their little pump for bringing things into them doesn't work very well, which means they can't pump in the poison antibiotics. So all the good, the healthy bacteria with the normal pumps, they pump into the antibiotic poison and then they die off. So then what happens is the ones that they were weaker, but they've now got no more competition, so they breed. They breed in hospitals. You actually find them in the disinfectant bottles. But if you send them out to the community, they wither quite quickly because they are weaker. So they didn't evolve. And the other one about bacteria was really cool is the fact that they did find some bacteria that had been taken by explorers to Antarctica before the development of antibiotics, and they have those same bacteria. They were there with their weaker thing, their weaker mutation. So you can drive trucks through the theory of evolution. Mostly people don't want to know, though.
It seems odd that people even in the medical profession who would know these things that you're explaining about bacteria could then still say it's evolved and focus on beneficial mutation as support when they know what you're saying. They understand this
I don't know if they do know. If you can't see, you can't see. You can't.
So that was N
for natural selection. Yep. Okay. So design in DNA. D, the DNA is dependent on the cell and the cell's dependent on DNA. Well, evolution doesn't win there. E, enormous complexity. The 3D thing of DNA is absolutely amazing. Did not evolve. S, software. The information isn't contained in the hardware. The language is outside of the DNA itself. Had to come from a designer. I was irreducible complexity. Remember the mouse trap and the fact of the New York City size cell. Everything needs everything else. And you take the postie out of the cell, it dies.
Yep.
G was getting new information. That was, think about the giraffe. It just doesn't happen. You've got to put so much more. You've got to change the whole thing. You've got to change a car into a space station. It doesn't happen bit by bit. And N was natural selection. Natural selection takes out information, so you may have some beneficial mutations, but they are basically not adding any information to the whole, to the DNA.
Yep.
So DNA was designed. And the amazing thing is that there's a designer.
If it's designed, it needs a designer.
Yeah.
When you were studying medicine, at one point you said evolution is wonderful as you were marvelling at some of these things. What were you actually reflecting on?
I think it had replaced God, because previously when I learned about God, he was this person who'd done stuff and walked away, leaving something amazing and some broken bits, but some amazing bits as well. Then when I was learning about the amazing human body and evolution had caused it, it was a sort of like a God up in the sky who'd done the thing, who you couldn't ask questions of, and you just had to accept that was what it was. So we were absolutely aware of the amazing intricacies of the human body, the cardiovascular system, the feedback loops in hormones, the process of birth, the concept of homeostasis, which means standing same, where you've got this set point, which is the best thing for survival, either the certain amount of water or oxygen or waste or pH, which is acidity. So you've got a set point, and then if you stay within the set point, you survive, and if you go too far outside the set point, you die. Okay, and say blood pressure. So you've got to have a mechanism for being able to measure what it is. You've got to have a mechanism for being able to send a message to say, hey, you've gone off track a little bit with your blood pressure too high, you've got to bring it back again. And there are all these different feedback loops where you've just got it just stays amazingly where it is. Otherwise, we would be dead. Right. You can't evolve those sort of things because everything fits together. And then in most systems, you've got what you do normally to keep it within the normal parameters. And then often there's a crisis thing that happens. And then sometimes there's an ultra crisis thing that happens to try and maintain life.
So there's judging of where the situation is and if there needs to be any changes, and then there's even planning for if something's going to go wrong or something really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do that in my psychiatry work. If someone is likely to have an episode of a particular mental illness, we work out a relapse management plan. It is, this is what you're like when you're normal, and this is what people see and how you interact with them and how they should interact with you. And then if you're slightly stressed, well, every human can be stressed. That doesn't mean disease. This is what you'll be like. That's what they'll see, and this is what they should do. Maybe help you get back on track again or solve the problem. On the other hand, if there's the signature of the illness, well, you may not be able to do much about that. They might have to do something different. And then there's, if things have really gone bad, this is the crisis of what we're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
So we work that out as a plan with people so that they can manage and monitor and really delight in their lives in the face of, the problem that they might be dealing with, which is a homeostatic mechanism.
And what you're saying is this is happening in our body.
All the time. So many examples.
What about another example? I've heard you mention circulation. Let's talk about that one.
Okay. I really enjoyed learning about this because it's so easy to see and you can imagine. So you've got the heart that's pumping 100,000 times a day, and it's pumping blood through the blood tubes, 100,000 kilometres of blood tubes you have in your body. And yes. Okay. So basically what it is, the circulation is a transport. It's your superhighway, which sends in the first responders if there's been a problem. You know how police, ambulance, fire department, well, we've got them in the human body as well. So the white blood cells are like the police, and they come along and they gobble up the invaders. And then you've got the platelets. They do a little clotting cascade, which is amazingly complicated. And what happens is you can plug up a hole in the side of the pipe. So you've got some bleeding, some tear in the pipe, and it's all bleeding out, and you send in your platelets and they will plug it up. But they won't plug it up so much that you have a clot in the whole pipe, because if you have an obstacle, well, you could die as well. So the concept that I was thinking about is the fact that something has to be produced that will make something get started, stay for long enough, and then be able to be dismantled. The control in deciding when you're going to do something like that.
There's lots of decisions being made.
Yeah, absolutely. And judgments, decisions against what is meant to be.
Yeah.
Is it okay to have a hole in the blood tube? Well, if you've got some invaders in the tissue, yes, you have to have a hole in the blood tube, and you send in your histamine. The white blood cells spit out some histamine. They open the little holes in the blood tube, and out other things go into the tissues to deal with it. So deciding when and where, you've got to have the grand picture. You've got to know something like that. And then you've got all the hormonal feedback loops. They were fun to learn as well because they're easy to see. You've got the thyroid stimulating hormone from your brain goes to the thyroid, which says, please make some thyroxine, make that go around the body and tell every cell of the body things to do with growth and energy usage. And if you don't have enough thyroxine, everything slows down. And if you have too much, it speeds up and you can die. The interesting thing about most of the feedback loops is they're involved in other feedback loops. And so if you say, well, let's just, for example, give us a gene which will increase our cortisol. So you might increase cortisol here, which does amazing things and might improve something, but it may increased cortisol will cause trouble over there. So things are so intricate and balanced and finely balanced that the idea of something just evolved, this thing, it's like putting a stick in the motor of a jet engine. Literally, we're going to change this little thing. No, it won't work. And because it won't work, there are so many ways that DNA doesn't change. And then you've got going back to when does DNA change, which is an interesting thing, which would probably bring us on to birth if you wanted to have a look at that. Should we go there?
You mentioned birth before. I'd love to.
Oh, an amazing thing. Okay, so this is there's probably not one example which says evolution didn't work. But if evolution depends on having lots and lots of goes at something, and if you fail, that's okay, eventually you'll succeed. Mm-hmm. Well, with birth, if you don't get it right, well, then those genes go nowhere. Okay, so just imagine.
And you've had 3 children?
I've had 3 children, yes, indeed. And yes, let me tell you about relaxin. That is the hormone which makes your ligaments stretch. Mm-hmm. Which is great to be able to let the baby out. The bones are too narrow for most average-sized babies to come through, and so if the ligaments are stretched, then everything moves. However, if your relaxin comes in too early, you might find yourself taking a step and wondering if you are going to be able to survive. So, middle child, I was on crutches, and
wow.
It all came back to normal afterwards, which was absolutely amazing. Mm. So, even to get the baby out, that is just mind-bogglingly complicated, because you've got the physiology, you've got all the different hormones that get things going, mm-hmm. and then you've got the mechanics, and then you've got the control. And did you know, when the baby's head hits the pelvic floor, mm-hmm. then the nerves of the pelvic floor send a message to the brain, do something, send down a hormone which is going to get things happening. It's like, okay, again, this concept of we've got to design something which will close. Okay, developing a baby in the uterus. We'd like to keep it closed, please. And then at some point we've got to open it. Okay, and then we've got to close again. Those things are in 3 dimension, and again, if you don't get it right, well, you die.
Such important decisions to be made.
Yes, indeed.
Wow.
So
okay.
we were designed. We were designed. And look, one thing I really feel sad about is the fact that I did medicine sort of in the dark with regard to the design. It was like, oh, this is wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful. It's like watching a lovely painting, but you don't own it. You know nothing about it. You're not connected to it. And then when I started to put together this idea of, oh, my goodness, everything's designed, there is a designer. Well, I wasn't actually wanting to talk to him for a while anyway. And most people, they go, I don't want to have a designer. You don't automatically go, wow, let me meet the designer. We don't. And we know about that.
Even though we can look at an amazing car or a jet plane and we know straight away that's being
we can
designed
see design. Yeah,
planned.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to our bodies, it's harder to accept. I find that interesting that you said that many people can see the design elements, but perhaps they don't want a designer.
Yeah.
The designer.
Absolutely.
Why do you think some people don't want a designer?
Okay. Well, we all want to be in charge of our lives, don't we? Absolutely. Yes. And there are things that are called stages of change. Initially, some people were looking at how do we help adults give up smoking. Now, if an adult has a broken leg and the doctor can go and do something to it, well, you just lie there and let it happen to you. But smoking is an issue of it's a behavioural change, and there's positives and negatives with that one. And if there weren't any positives, people wouldn't keep doing it. But there are some big negatives, and then so people were looking at how can we help people, and they realised it depends on their stage of change. So some people are pre-contemplative, which is a nice way of saying in denial, or really saying, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, okay? I want to keep doing, either I'm scared I can't change, or I haven't thought about it, I didn't realise it was possible, or everybody else is doing it. Then there's people we call in contemplation. They're actually thinking about, maybe I'd like to change, but I'm not really sure. I haven't really got a reason for changing, or I haven't seen enough information to make me comfortable. Then you've got people who have a reason to change. They're in determination. It's like they can see their target, their goal, but they just need to know how to get there. And then there are people who are practicing the change, and often we go backwards and forwards quite a bit.
Right.
And then there's people in maintenance, and then we have relapse. And I work with a lot of people dealing with substance use, and we help them to see, and we say, hey, would you like to know what on the stage? And giving people information is just so important. And I think it's so respectful that, and I say to my people, with regard to your stages of change with all of your drug use, what do you reckon? And one chap said, I'm definitely in pre-contemplation for my cigarettes. I'm in contemplation for my cannabis because that's why I'm here at this drug rehab. And, I'm in maintenance for my heroin. I never use that again. And I showed him what we do to help people move along those stages. And the first thing you do is you make a relationship with the person. You see them as they really are. And often people haven't been seen. They haven't been validated. They've been told what to do. And you can get change from coercive control from outside, but you're more likely to get change if it flows from inside. But that's harder to control because the person has a choice. And
so that's about them actually wanting
to change. Yeah, but not only just wanting, but being able to be supported in that change. Yep. And we talk about motivational interviewing, which is just a fancy word for saying asking questions, which is interviewing, and motivational is to do with movement. And we do a little decision balance chart, and we say, okay, what are the positives and negatives for this particular option or that particular option or the other? And then we let the person, usually they feel anxious because it's easier to stay the same. We have this homeostatic thing in even our ideas, and even giving information which shifts that is uncomfortable. So the person has to be able to tolerate the uncertainty of what if I have to change, or what if I can't stay where I am. And that's the anxiety rises, which basically does the homeostatic thing, which is go back and don't change, don't see. And I was like that.
Right.
I didn't want to know anything different. I had this fixed idea that God was, up there with a big stick, and, he didn't really like me. And if I spoke to him, I didn't think he'd really care anyway. So I didn't ever want to face that sort of possibility. And again, if we can give people the knowledge of, I'm in that stage of change. And the Creation Ministries conference that we went to, where my eyes were open, I was clearly in contemplation. I was looking for something. And a really good friend, who's still a really good friend, he was in pre-contemplation. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how I could, change. For people who are smokers, if they say, well, I don't really want to change now, or I don't want to change at all, the most important thing is to go, okay, well, you're a human being. You're designed. You are an amazing person, and it's your right to stay there. I mean, I'm not your coach. I didn't design you. I didn't create you. So I don't have the right to try and force a person. But again, you can invite a person to look and say, are you interested in the information? And if they are, that's great. And if they're not, still love them. Well, I was looking, and I'm really grateful to Creation Ministries that you have been providing the information. And I've learnt probably more science, more medicine of the challenge evolution sort, certainly more genetics from the CMI material and, the website, and the fact that these PhD scientists actually, they care about the minute detail of truth. And some of the ideas that the creationists used to talk about some years ago, when it was found that those things weren't actually true, or there was some reason for them not to be, they tell everybody, don't use that as evidence. So once you actually start to look for design and you meet God and you go, I really care about truth, but then doors open and you start to learn a whole lot of other stuff, which has just been really amazing.
As we're finishing up, Dianne, you've decided to speak up about these things, but that puts you in a pretty unpopular position in some ways, does it not? Yeah,
certainly does. Look, I understand that when any new idea, even if it's true, comes along, normally people will ignore it, they'll deny, then they'll probably ridicule it, then they usually shoot the messenger, and then if the truth keeps popping up again and again, people start to look, and then some will never want to look, but that's okay, and then sometimes people will adopt it. And I keep remember Semmelweis.
Who's he?
He was a doctor in Vienna, 1800s, and he realised that if people, the doctors were going to the autopsy, and then nobody washed their hands in those days because they didn't even know about germs, then they go and deliver babies, and these women get infected with bacteria.
Wow.
then they die, and then these ladies end up on the autopsy table, and then they are examined to try and find out why did they die. They did not know about bacteria in those days. And he'd figured something to do with if you washed your hands in between or you washed your knives. And anyway, he was saying that people ought to wash their hands in between. Yeah, I mean, we're gobsmacked by that idea.
We take that for granted, the knowledge that we have.
Granted. Well, the same rollout, the homeostasis was, well, doctors can't kill their patients. It was something like, bad things can't be transmitted by gentlemen's hands, literally was what they said. And so at first everybody ignored it, then they ridiculed it, and then they shot the messenger. Well, not quite. He was certainly disgraced. And then eventually some people realised it was true, and then eventually became normal. But I think the way the messenger interacts, you've got to be respectful. You've got to say, hey, I've found something here and I think this is very important, and I'm offering to say, would you like it? But if you don't like it, that's okay, because relationship has to continue. So, I know I work with lots of people who don't agree with what I believe in, and I don't agree with what they believe in, but we get on well as friends or colleagues, and we continue to be able to function as human beings in respectful and productive relationships, regardless of what we believe. And that's what we want, is for, you tell the truth, but with gentleness and respect.
Okay, so as we learn about these incredible evidences, particularly the ones you've been sharing with us today, about how the body has so much design in it, we can share that, and people can choose how they respond.
Absolutely, yeah, because that was the way I came to this area. If I'd been beaten over the head with it, I would have pushed back and found lots of reasons and dug my head in the sand, and so we just offer it. And you've got lots of resources on offer.
And if you want more of that information, you can sign up for our email newsletter. It's called Info Bites, and the link will be in the description below. Dianne, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise.
My pleasure.